You said do the intro. That was it.
I'm waiting to be intro.
I'm waiting to be introduced. What's going to happen next? Coming off that Juncture episode, it just made me think that we need a bit more structure around here. So allow me to kick us off today. Hi, everybody. I'm John.
And I'm James.
This is Games with John and James, episode 28. We're on 28 now. It's pretty crazy.
Wow. 28 weeks.
Yeah.
Air high five.
That was the sound of an air high five you all just heard.
It was so fast you can't hear it.
So fast. Just like Sonic the Hedgehog. But before we get to my review of Knuckles Chaotix, James, what did you do last weekend?
So last weekend was kind of a mellow and zen weekend for me. I have been really engaged with Children of Morta, the roguelike RPG. It's been it follows the Bergson family. It's super fun and engaging.
For a second, I swear to God, I thought you were going to say it follows the birds and the bees, and I'm like, oh, I want to play that game.
Well, that game just escalated quickly. No, it's a super fun roguelite, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. I don't have to think too much other than the combat. It's not something that I have to devote 5 billion hours to. Like, it's been a nice zen brain dump, because I also finished Octopath Traveler last weekend.
And you're trying to get rid of that as soon as possible.
I hate you. Did that. Tried a brunch spot, actually. I was able to find this really badass place in town. They did a...
Is it called Badass Brunch?
That would be really cool. Patent it. That's going to be our next... we're branching out. Introducing Brunch with John and James.
From the makers of butt.com.
Here is brunchbutt.com. So it's called Scratch Kitchen here in San Antonio.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Their biscuits and gravy were dynamite.
Dig it.
And then Martha and I, she was like, I'm feeling like gaming a little bit. And I was like, ooh, say less.
That's like when your ears perk up like a dog. Just like...
It's like my RPG sensor is like...
Doesn't she not like them?
No, she gave it the college try. And
like me.
She no, shorter than you. She hates menus. And
so you just talk about going to a restaurant. Now you talk.
So I legitimately thought. So we both love Studio Ghibli movies, and I thought the original Ni no Kuni on PlayStation 3 would be a really good intro RPG for her. Mm-hmm. It's super graphically appealing because it's that unique Studio Ghibli art design. Mm-hmm. The characters don't really take themselves seriously. I mean, it's like British/Scottish voice acting.
You can't take Shrek seriously.
And I was like, okay, this would be fun. And then literally she's not even out of the tutorial. She's like, why is this a menu for this? That's a menu for this. That's a menu here. When all I want to do is this. And I'm like, and I don't have a justified answer because in reality, it's still in the vein of your old style RPG.
It's like, I hope that she never plays the first Dragon Quest because there's a stairs option. And I'm pretty sure she'd see that and be like, what the hell is this?
So we actually loaded up Mario Kart, had some fun, and it was all in all, it was a pretty good weekend.
Solid gaming / brunch and weekend. That sounds cool, man.
What about for you?
It was kind of low key as well. As I've mentioned in my collecting episode foibles from the last episode, I've been indulging in
episode. You mean 2 episodes ago? Get your timeline right.
It's a nebulous concept, okay? Last episode can be referring to any previous episode, all right?
Never let them know what time we record. Very, John is very wise.
Don't tell them that we record sometimes episodes in like 5-episode batches. Don't tell them that. Anyway, I have been diving into playing some of my Saturn-based games, which actually informs the topic today because I picked up games like X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, other fighting games. I'm actually looking to get Virtua Fighter 1 and 2 next. I got Sonic Jam coming. I got both Nights and Christmas Nights, and so I've been playing a lot of those. And I mentioned it in the other and again, I mentioned it in the last episode. I got Knuckles Chaotix as well. Finished that, so just in time for our review. But other than that, I've been kind of indulging more of my creative side. I've been doing a lot of drawing recently. If you know the story from last episode, I'm just saying it just to make you upset. But if you know the story that I was a bit preoccupied for a while, going through some trials and tribulations of my own. But coming out of that, I feel pretty inspired and pretty creative. So I'm diving into my drawings again, which is very nice. Also, I'm making it a point to try some new things. And one of the things I really like in this world is music. And I mean, this is where we talk about, I'm going to start a new podcast where I learn how to play the bass. No, it's not like that. I'm just checking out new music, honestly. So I decided to give Paul McCartney a try.
Hey, the classic Paul McCartney, new age Paul McCartney.
Like mid-70s, like his solo stuff, post-Beatles breakup.
So still classic, okay.
Yeah, and I was listening to Ram. That was his like second studio album, and people apparently hated that album. But I was listening to it like, this is freaking great. Like, it feels ahead of its time. You know what I'm saying?
That was a good album. So I do think like late 60s, early 70s Paul McCartney, I do think he, like, even the Beatles in general, they were ahead of their time. So, like, I'm a big proponent of music. So, like, hearing you say that, that's been awesome. Like, for me, so my wife and I, we finished the show Bridgerton season 2, and they actually take current songs, some 80s, like you name it, songs all across the spectrum, and convert them over just strictly with string instruments, violin, cello.
It's kind of like those medieval remixes you see on YouTube of like Gangsta's Paradise. That's amazing.
It was like, it's been fun. Like, I've been listening to that. That's been pretty zen for me. So, like, on the drive home, I'll just listen to that, just kind of chill and relax. So, fuck yeah, man.
Yeah, that's the way that I've typified it to other people is because I like music so much and I feel I listen to everything. I love music. So there are some things that I have not listened to myself because, you know, when you're a kid, you have your dad or your mom say like, oh, you don't want to listen to that stuff. That stuff's trash. And you just believe them. So
I mean,
like that,
I'm sorry, I gotta shit. So
okay. At first, I thought you said I have to shit, and I'm like, all right, go.
I have to share this.
All right.
My dad, growing up, like his family gave him shit for listening to rock. Like my dad loves all things 80s. You could play any 80s hairband, any 80s hard rock, heavy metal, even pop. My dad knows it, knows the song, can sing to it within 5 seconds, even if there's no like singing for like a good 45. Like my dad loves that generation, all the way even to the 60s with like the Eagles, Blue Oyster Cult. Like, so I grew up, you know, classic rock.
Sure.
So
what happened?
90s come around and music's changing. We're getting that grunge kind of alternative scene.
You go from like Poison to Alice in Chains. And like, what happened?
Oh, I went to Red Hot Chili Peppers. Remember that song? It was like mid-90s, Californication.
That was 2000, bro.
No, I thought it was mid-90s.
No, Californication was on that one of their first albums in like the early 2000s.
Hey, you know what? We always do this to each other. Let's go to the damn Google for once.
All right, while you're researching that, I'll finish my point, and then you can finish your story, okay? So the music is something I value very deeply because I've grown up around people who play games and are huge nerds. They really only listen to video game soundtracks or game-based stuff, which is fine, but I've always said you need to develop your sonic palette. It's like, you're going to have your genres that you love, you're going to have your genres that you hate, but the thing is that if you learn more of this stuff or experience more things, you become a more well-textured human being. So that's all I got to say. So I'll be checking out more stuff in the future, and I probably won't be giving reviews of it, but you'll just know what I'll be listening to.
So, we were both wrong. It was late 90s, but not 2000s. It was June 8th, 1999.
I was around that window. I knew that.
So I was listening to that, and my dad hears, Dream of Californication.
And then he just gives you mother's milk. It's like, here you go.
And he comes in. He's like, you need to turn that shit off. That's
What?
bad for you.
What?
And so young me is trying to process this because I'm 13 years old, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm just like, what?
I'm not going to be my dad.
So fast forward, like he never explained it. Like, so I just had to kind of listen to like my alternative music without him hearing.
Uh-huh. Headphones.
So fast forward, it's like 2006, 2007. The song comes on the radio in my car, and my dad doesn't tell me anything because, you know, it's my car, I listen to music. And I remember what he did. And I'm like, Dad, why did you have such an issue? He's like, it has the word fornication in it. You were 13. I didn't want you fucking. And I'm like, that's what you get out of that song?
What? He grew up around freaking hair metal where all the songs were about that, so I guess it makes sense.
I was like, Dad, it was literally sex, drugs, and rock and roll for you. He's like, yeah, but I didn't listen to the influence. And I was like, do you think I was gonna listen to the word fornication?
Oh man.
So we had a good laugh together because we kept going back and forth like over and over, and then we both just realized we were being silly, and it was like that great laugh. But
that traditional, you know, father-son type of laugh that a lot of people don't experience in this world.
God, you went dark with that. You know what? I'm going to push you along. Give him the review, Dark Man.
Dark Man. Yeah, that movie's great.
Dark Man X.
That's a fornication music.
Oh. So, tell me about Knuckles Chaotix.
All right, do we want to do the timing like I did last time, or do you want me to just jump in?
No, you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
How ready?
Steady.
Go.
There. That's a good song, too. Let's talk about this song first. No, Knuckles Chaotix. It's a game. I said the last episode that you don't often get to play a game from your childhood that's new or you never experienced. And I adored it from beginning to end. I just loved the entire thing because it was so different and the graphics were so cool. Everything was so colorful and interesting and crazy looking. Sprites were all scaling and doing all sorts of weird stuff. It felt like a really polished, like, tech demo with good music and cool 3D special stages. And the way, looking at it now after I've beaten it, the best way I can describe it is the people who don't play Sonic games, Knuckles Chaotix is what they think a Sonic game is. Basically just bouncing around and jumping and hitting and running into things and getting gems and stuff. And I don't really think I can describe it any better. If you look at other Sonic games of the era, those were probably way better versions of itself, but Knuckles Chaotix is just a fun toy to play with. Like, all of the power-ups and abilities that the characters have completely trivialize the level design. You can play as Charmybee and just fly everywhere, and just go everywhere you want to go. Or you can play as Knuckles and just climb everything, or be Espio where you can run on the ceiling. There are like no rules. It's just they throw a bunch of stuff together and it just works. It has cutscenes in it, which, surprised me. The bosses are not memorable, but they look really cool. Again, it's like a cool toy to play with. Not necessarily a cohesive Sonic game, but a Sonic experience. And I really enjoyed it. And I have to enjoy it because of what I paid for it. So.
Are you finally going to reveal what you paid for it?
$250.
Ooh, Nelly.
It's complete in box, and the label are really nice. So I paid for quality.
I mean, that's quality memory. So, I mean, you have time left.
How much?
Does it get a certified play it?
Certified play it. Right there. Play it. If you don't want to spend the amount of money I spent, get yourself Kega or whatever emulators are out there for Sega 32X stuff and play it that way.
Awesome. So, John has successfully accomplished a review. We are very thankful and happy. But, which segues us...
Also, I'm going to open up a new tier on my Patreon called the Knuckles tier, where you just give me $250 a month.
If you listen to the podcast, you'll know.
I'll draw lewds of Knuckles, whatever they do on Patreon.
No, just draw a knuckle. They get every $250, it's one more knuckle until they complete the fist.
You complete the fist, and guess where that fist is going? Anyway.
So yeah, this has been it's been a lot of fun, and it actually brings us to this week's topic. And
how does the talk of Sonic bring us into this week's topic?
Well, because he was the first entry in this miniseries that we still have running.
Oh, that's right. You're giving me a segue. We're doing fallen franchises today, people. And as much as I would love to see a Knuckles Chaotix sequel or some other version of Knuckles, which would, be fun. Idris Elba did a good job. We're going to be discussing Capcom versus games and why they don't exist anymore. Or they tried to exist again, and then they don't anymore. And it's very sad.
So, don't touch that dial. Here's some badass music. You have to guess what game it is. If you guess right, and you guess it in the comments, because we have a Capcom post on our Instagram somewhere, find it and comment there. I will be sure to watch and pay attention. But when you do, if you guess what Capcom versus game this came from, you will have a shout out on our episode.
All right. That's a promise. That's a genuine John and James promise right there. Stick around, folks. since we're talking about fighting games today, there was a recent interview. I have no idea. I just remember seeing it in a blurb in like a Twitter post.
Mm-hmm.
And it said how during the wrap up of one of the King of Fighters games, they just made a build for fun that had Ryu and Ken and Goku in it. So somewhere in the world, I'm pretty sure on some lost hard drive computer somewhere, there is a version like King of Fighters 99 that has Ryu, Ken, and Goku in it. And I'm freaking out. Just like, that'd be so crazy to play.
Actually, do you know what a great Capcom versus game would have been?
What?
Capcom
Versus
all. And it's literally a continuation with infinite DLC that it's a one-time payment, so it's not like a recurring thing like what they did with Smash, right? But it's literally 3 people from every franchise. Tekken, Street Fighter, just Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, and you just go and go and go and go until they're literally fighting The Rock, John Cena, and it turns into versus WWE at the very end.
At the end, they get Def Jam in there too, so Method Man and Redman are in there.
Oh, and then with each and every iteration, it's like a graphical alteration if you want to use it. So like if it's the Def Jam Fight for New York characters, it switches over to that kind of cel-shaded, like intense style. If it's versus like Dragon Ball characters, it switches over to that style. If it's versus Street Fighter, it switches to Street Fighter 2 style. And just like bounces back and forth. And I feel like I've hurt your head because your brain is trying to process this.
And then there's a mode that switches it to Virtua Fighter where they're all flat blocks.
Oh, God. Ugh.
Yeah!
So we tangented pretty hard. But that'd be kind of a cool concept.
It would be an impossible concept, but I mean...
Hey, the impossible
it's not
is
our
possible.
Money.
Hey, the impossible is possible when it's not our money.
Because banks don't care. It's not their money.
Exactly. But, so Capcom Versus. So John, he is our resident fighting guru. This man loves his fighting games. He loves the technical aspects, the challenge aspects with his friends. He's steamrolled multiple people in fighting games, with the exception of Smash, where I beat him in.
I've beaten you too, though.
You have, but
I'd say we're on equal flooring.
All right, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
Loser buys the other one lunch for a week.
I gotta bust out my Danky Kang skills. My Danky Bong Bluntry skills.
Challenge accepted?
Sure, we'll do that.
Sweet. You heard it. But the Capcom Versus games, when I got to experience them, so my first time with Capcom Versus, I mean, do we want to... Let's start at the beginning. What was the first Capcom Versus? I will hold that thought. What was the first one you remember, and how did you get introduced to this series, John?
Well, if you want, we can go back to the full history, dawn of time of Capcom itself, where I would like play Mega Man on Nintendo. But in terms of the actual Versus games, I used to think fighting games were kind of stupid, and I used to look at things like Mortal Kombat, and I was like, that's too violent. I was pretty much a little bitch-made kid. But...
you're from Oregon, that's why.
But anyway, I would always see stuff like the Street Fighter versus... I wasn't really into fighting games as a kid. Mm-hmm. I developed that stuff later. And the reason why is because I looked at it in the same way I looked at sports games, where it's like, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Why would you want to play a game like that? Again, dumb kid logic. But when I started playing... When I saw Street Fighter 3... Third Strike, when it came out in like 99, 2000, I saw like the animations and all the cool stuff that made these characters look really cool and do cool special moves. And I was like, I want to play that. So I remember playing Marvel vs. Capcom. That was one of the first ones because it had Mega Man in it. And I was like, cool, I'm going to be Mega Man. I'm going to be Iron Man and just shoot big lasers and beat up Spider-Man all day. That sounds like fun. So yeah, I think when I had my Dreamcast, the first Capcom vs. game was that one. I knew of other ones, but I just didn't play them.
So I remember so I'm living in Turkey at the bowling alley. So to where I can coherently talk about this, I have the history of all the Capcom Versus games at my disposal, ready to go.
We both took notes. Look at that.
We have notes.
We actually have structure this episode, everyone.
Oh my God, it's a first.
We're Big Boy podcast now.
So X-Men versus Street Fighter. That was my first ever Capcom Versus game. They had an arcade for it, and originally it was, your typical arcade.
So you got to play a cab somewhere that had them, and you see Cyclops and Ryu shaking hands. Hell yeah. So
they actually discounted it, and normally they're like 50 cents, you get a play, right? The bowling alley had discounted it down to one token only, so 25 cents.
Yo.
I remember, so when I was in Turkey, I was in middle school. I'd get out of middle school, and then I would go over to the bowling alley, and me and my friends, we'd just hang out there for a few hours, just going through the full rotation of friends. Winner stayed playing.
Yeah, traditional fighting game arcade rules.
Loser pays in, right?
Yep.
And
You rack your tokens so you know you're next in line.
it was fun. Like, I played as Akuma, I did Wolverine. Like, those were my two mains back in the day. That was my first introduction, and I remember it felt different than other fighting games. I played Street Fighter arcades, played Street Fighter on my Super Nintendo. It was really fun. Like Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, awesome games, right?
Yeah.
But
it was the arcade renaissance that they themselves created. That's what that game did.
and like the Capcom Versus series, it struck different. And I remember always kind of looking for more. Because like after X-Men versus Street Fighter, my friend he had Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter.
Sweet.
Like he had that. And I was like, but isn't this it's not just X-Men.
It's not just X-Men, and it's not just... So I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's cool that you actually got to experience those naturally, whereas I just looked at them and I thought, those look cool, but I'm not going to play them, though.
You were a rebellious child.
Well, like I said, I didn't really get involved in fighting games until like the Dreamcast, which was like the ultimate fighting game system.
Except for Power Stone. Don't ever play that game. It's awful.
Never play it against me, is what you're saying.
Thank me later.
Anyway.
John didn't even let me win once.
Just because you suck at a game doesn't mean other people have to.
No, you dumb your skill down to make it enjoyable.
I don't think you know me well enough. It's like when people are at...
So it's like the Dave Chappelle skit with the kid playing basketball who's terminally ill.
He's getting his ass whooped in street hoops.
Come on, Timmy, don't die on me now.
He defibrillates over that. He just pick up your sticks, boy. Let's go. But just you brought it up and you did.
Like, oh, I'm just diving into my memories. So
you're diving into your memories, and for me, I had a bit more of the notes structured to it, where
absolutely
Street Fighter 2 comes out and sets the arcades back on fire after a bit of a lull in the late 80s into the early 90s, right?
Well, yeah. So I mean, you look at it was originally the arcade cabinets that were coming out. Everybody was loving them over here. Americans would they had the testing arm here in America. Then the cabinets would get released,
like Polybius.
Oh man! But then let's be real, the Famicom or regular Nintendo, depending on where you were in the world, that came out, and you saw arcades kind of wane because now you could finally enjoy all of that at home without it being butchered. So we saw that decline until
16-bit eras came out and started having the arcade experience bringing home with the Neo Geo and all that stuff. Yeah. Well, the main thing is the arcade renaissance came back with fighting games, and everybody was trying to make their own fighting games. Street Fighter 2 led the charge. And then
absolutely.
That's when it was in the mid-90s, they got the rights for Marvel to make a X-Men fighting game, and that was X-Men Children of the Atom, which was their first kind of way to dive into the Marvel pantheon of characters, followed by Marvel Superheroes, which was kind of like War of the Gems, where you actually use the Infinity Stones, which, are very popular nowadays. But
hey, they're all destroyed now in the Marvel Universe.
Yes, they are. Thank you, Captain Iron Man.
Actually, no, they never showed if they destroyed them again, remember?
Everybody just turned to dust. So we can get into the MCU in our other podcast, every other podcast you listen to. But so those were the initial ones. They made characters that you were able to play as Wolverine, Spider-Man, Captain America. Cable didn't come out until later, and thank God, because he kind of sucks. But like my opinions on superheroes and comic books aside, because I could talk about comic books for
don't you talk about Mutant Jesus. That's literally, like, if you look at it and break it down, he's literally, Cable is referenced as Mutant Jesus.
What about Century?
Oh my God.
No, but yeah, so around that time, Capcom was also developing the Alpha fighting games, which were the hot new versions of Street Fighter, featuring younger characters. And
better graphics, smoother everything.
Yeah, and they were introducing more story elements, which was crazy. And
those stories were weird, man.
Like when you beat the game as Blanca and you go home and you hug your mom. Just exactly
you will not be shocked. Don't worry, Mama.
Or like when Chun-Li kills M. Bison and goes to, pray at her father's grave and then strips all her clothes off. It's like, now I could be a party girl. It's like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, so Capcom not necessarily known for storytelling.
But still a fun time. But these games are being developed concurrently. And then they had the idea, well, we have these games using the same type of development architecture. How about we just have a party and have them cross over, which led to the X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter franchises. And those were the stepping stones that eventually led to one of the biggest ones, which is Marvel vs. Capcom.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those happened within the span of 3 years, by the way. Those 3 games, Marvel vs. Capcom, I remember blowing me away. Because, again, you got to play as Mega Man and you got to shoot Spider-Man in the face.
So Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2, that's the ones I've experienced the most. Like I remember having it on the PlayStation 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I kind of pulled a U, what you're doing with your Sega Saturn being, Japan, like the Japan region.
Mm-hmm.
So if you remember, Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes, Japan only.
Mm-hmm.
We never got that. That was the very first Marvel vs. Capcom. And if you get the chance to play that one, it's so smooth. And they still had it at kind of a rinky-dink Japanese arcade. So we're visiting some friends that are stationed over there. It's like 2003. And I legit got to play that on an arcade over there in Japan.
Wait, MVC 1 or 2?
Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. So pre-Marvel vs. Capcom 1. That was like the testing one, remember?
No, wait a minute. Which one are we talking about?
I'm talking about Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes.
No, that was the one that came out on the Dreamcast, bro.
PS1.
The PS1 was the butchered version, yeah.
That was the one. That was the arcade cabinet. But you're right; it did come out on the Dreamcast as well, and the arcade.
I thought you were dropping some serious knowledge on me. Like there was one before it.
No, so I got to play that one on the arcade. Like the cabinet was like wrecked. You know how like
when you see wear and tear on a cabinet, it's really sad.
You can always tell which cabinets were used for what, right? As horrible as that sounds,
as the way that's described, yes.
But like so whenever you have a fighting game arcade, and this is one of the things that I really so we're talking our childhood here, and we're talking kind of the heyday of fighting games. Because right now in today's society, like obviously you know where we're talking here, but you have Tekken, you have Street Fighter, and you have Soul Calibur.
Mm-hmm.
And Mortal Kombat is kind of there still.
Wait, are we talking now times?
So I'm just talking now. Like now times, there's no fighting games don't really have the substance that I feel we had with the Marvel vs. Capcom series, like the Capcom versus series, and I appreciated that time of fighting games so much more. So shout out Capcom for figuring that out back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Well, the way that it worked was, if you think about the nature of fighting games themselves, is that they're inherently flawed as soon as they come out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's what makes iteration so important. That's why there were 4 different versions of Street Fighter 2. You know what I mean? So that was a way for them to iterate and release new games and just try new things, which was really cool. And that's why we saw those games pretty much released within the realm of like a year of one another, where you had X-Men versus Street Fighter. It was like, what if they could fight Captain America? Or what if we put Mega Man or Venom in here? Or what if we put this character in here? And when you have a team that's already working at an even clip to just crank these things out, the fighting game renaissance, they were trying to ride that as far as they could until they completely crushed it with Street Fighter 3. So,
I mean, if you think about it, because I mean, we're talking about the Capcom Versus series, like 2000 was kind of the pinnacle, because
you got Marvel versus Capcom 2. And for me as well, you got Capcom versus SNK. Hell yeah.
Which one?
The Dreamcast one.
Okay. Not the Match of the Millennium?
See, this is the thing. It's in my notes right here. The Versus series goes in a lot of different places.
Yeah, it does.
The initial Versus series was the Marvel vs. Capcom ones. And then they thought, okay, we have something with crossovers. So how about the other people making the fighting games? The premier 2D fighters out there was SNK with the King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, Real Bout, and Samurai Showdown, and all this stuff. And it's funny because it feels like the development track, especially on the Neo Geo Pocket, took the same track, where they made portable versions of things like King of Fighters and The Last Blade and Samurai Showdown, and thought, hey, you're making a Capcom versus SNK, what if we make an SNK versus Capcom? And then they made 2 of them, and then they made a card game and all sorts of stuff. You're on the same website I was on, because you're looking at the Mahjong game right now, aren't you?
Yeah, so I think we could say 96 to 2000. That was the pinnacle of the versus games, right? They were churning them out, multiple ones throughout the year after year, and everyone was like, we can look at it any way you want, left, right, up, down. They were all hits. Like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, legendary. Capcom vs. SNK on the Dreamcast, legendary.
Yeah.
Like
they felt like parties. Like, especially MVC2. But that game had over 55 characters in it, and while people can have their opinions on, who's tier or who's, at the tournament level or who's Evo ready and stuff, Roll is not top tier. Servbot is not top tier. We get that. But it's still fun to play.
Mm-hmm.
There was this spirit of just fun and experimentation that was really cool between the variable types and the different grooves and all sorts of systems that tried to cater to different players, but also cater to just seeing what sticks. And I think that's what was really cool about this era of fighting games. This era of games in general. Now they're too expensive. My old man's showing already. I want to stay happy, damn it.
So they deviated a little bit. So the cool part with this one and the cool part with this episode of Fallen Franchises, so a lot of the others, it was kind of a little bit of theory, a little bit of through the times, like in Sonic or the Kingdom Hearts one or even the Mega Man one.
Yeah, a lot of it was also, opinion because, as I've said before in this show, throw objectivity out the window. If you're not here to hear the both of us say things that we feel about games, you're kind of not here. You're kind of here for the wrong reason.
And with the Versus series, like, this is one of the few you can literally definitively track year through year. Good, bad, ugly, train wreck, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, oh man, it's funny that you brought up, I think it was in the preamble, I don't know if I cut that part yet. We'll figure it out. But there was going to be a game after SNK closed down and the talent moved over to Capcom. They were going to do a game called Capcom All-Stars, which was going to be a fighting game, but also like a Final Fights type of game where you go around a city getting into fights. And they scrapped that to make Capcom Fighting Jam. And that makes me so angry.
Hey, maybe it'll come back one day.
Maybe it will. Who knows? That'd be great. But at the same time, we're talking about the heyday of all this stuff. There are some later entries that unfortunately put a frown on my face, and we'll talk about those in just a bit.
So, where I think things started to shift. So, obviously, you've heard us, all these games we've mentioned so far have all been pretty smash hits. And that's not to say there haven't been other smash hits in later iterations. But because of the success of what they were having, Capcom kind of was like, you know what? We can create almost anything, keep it like this, and you guys will buy it. We didn't get this in America. Came out for the Dreamcast in Japan only. But it was Capcom and Saikyo All-Stars. It was called Tyson Net Gimmick, which is basically a Mahjong battler. What?
That is the most obscure thing I think I've found, other than the Capcom versus Everyone, which was like a mobile game that did something. I don't know, but we're getting a bit ahead of schedule. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we've talked about the good years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the first really weird one that kind of made you pause.
Well, I don't even remember even knowing about it.
Well, we didn't because Japan realized, if we put this out in America, it will flop.
Well, sure.
Do you know how to play Mahjong?
No, and I don't intend to learn. But what
I actually do, and I have a Mahjong set if you ever want to play.
Because you said that so sheepishly, now I want to learn how to play. But the whole thing is that, yes, the fighting game renaissance happened in the early 90s, and then they just started cranking out all these games. It got to the point where they didn't even advertise Street Fighter 3 as Street Fighter. They just called it 3 when they put out the original cabinets. That was stupid, and it brought about the downfall because there was just so much product out there. Like, between, you had all of the concurrent cabinets of the X-Men versus Street Fighters and the Marvel versus Capcoms, the Alpha series, the movie-based game that had the digitized graphics next to Killer Instinct, and literally every other person who was also trying to chase the fighting game trend. It was just full by the year 2000, and that's why I think MVC2 was such an important game, along with Capcom versus SNK2, because they were send-offs to this wonderful era of just fun playtime fight games.
Oversaturation was the big killer, and if we look at fighting games as a whole from 96, when we first mentioned, all the way to Capcom versus SNK2, 2001, right?
Yeah, that's about like a 6-year span.
in that 6-year span, easily, like we've talked about how many they pushed out. They were churning them out like it was water.
Yep.
And then you have your Killer Instincts, your Clay Fighters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Put Clay Fighter on the same pedestal as these games.
I'm not. I'm just using it as a placeholder fighter.
Yeah.
But you hit the nail on the head, right? The market was so oversaturated that outside of the 2 gems we mentioned, they kind of shot themselves in the foot. Like Capcom versus SNK 2 hit it out of the park. I honestly can't speak good, and I own that game on PS2. Mm-hmm. You know my genre. The only other fighting game I owned on my PS2 was Arcane Hearts, for crying out loud, and that was here recently.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you?
Why? Why not? I got a good deal.
I got a good deal. That's the excuse I'd give too.
But Marvel vs. Capcom 2, so
you actually have that still?
I did when I sold the collection. PS2'd.
Ah, man.
It might be a flashback video game still, so...
in the freaking pristine case, spinning around with a light on top of it.
Well, I don't know if you would want it, because it was sealed.
Oh.
I'll
trade you my Knuckles Chaotix.
So I bought, for that one, I actually bought a collection, and within the collection was all 4 of the original Dot Hack games, including Quarantine with the anime DVDs. It was in pristine condition. It had Atelier Iris 1 through 3 and a few other really, really notable kind of out there PS2 JRPGs. And then randomly, still sealed, so still brand new, was Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So I asked the guy, I was like, why didn't you play this, man? This was really fun. He's like, truth be told, I hate fighting games, but when I went into GameStop when they were transitioning to other stuff, they still had this sealed and they had it clearanced. And in my head, he said, in my head, I thought, oh, this might be worth money someday. And all the games I mentioned, if you add up price-wise, that's an asinine amount of money. That was the one he included as the freebie for me buying all those heavy-hitting JRPGs.
I'm mad right now. I'm smiling, but I'm angry.
John went angry mode. He didn't even know.
You
were at my house so many times. How did you not see it? The sealed stuff was in the front.
I don't go looking through your drawers, man. I don't do that.
You walked in the door, and then it was Video Game Mecca. And to your left was entire bookshelf full of games. If you would have noticed, I would have just given it to you.
Oh. You
weren't expecting this in this episode, were you?
No, I'm going to choke a grown man as soon as we go to break. Okay.
You're going to Homer Simpson me?
Yes, I'm going to friggin'... Why you little? My name is Homer Simpson.
But I weirdly off track, but...
Yeah, incredibly off track, because I'm going to choke a man.
But Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Uh-huh.
I can't think of a better fighter when it came to the PS2 generation, right? For me,
this is a very Capcom focused episode. Yeah. But yes, we know we're going to take a break in a bit here to get into the more dark times. But yes, I want you to finish your statement.
So for me, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, my brother and I, we'd get home from school, we would go at each other. It was such a fun game. They had the arcade cabinet at the BX where we were living when we were living in Italy.
Yo.
And whenever I took a break, because I was a grocery bagger, me and my friends would literally turn dollar bills into quarters, go over to the cabinet, and just go all out.
Nice.
It was that game for me, in my opinion, was the pinnacle, along with Capcom versus SNK 2. I honestly think, since we're going through the timeline,
mm-hmm.
those were the highest of the highs. There's a reason Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is balls ass expensive still.
Yep. You get the whole balls and the whole ass.
There's a reason it's still played in various video game tournaments. There's a reason it's...
Infinite Magneto juggles, yeah.
That game is so... Yeah, don't even bring that up. Fuck everybody who's done that to me. Yeah, it's been a lot of people.
Iceman, play as him, no chip damage.
So such good games. And as John said, we're going to take a break here. So because Capcom hit that amazing high... there's going to be a dark time coming, so don't touch that dial.
We just spent a lot of time getting real happy. Now let's get real sad.
Now we have to bring forth the hard truth of the Versus series.
Don't go anywhere, folks. Next stop is Bummerville.
Population, 2 bums.
Poop.
Booty.
You know who it's for you. You know who you are.
Your head hurts. So we said Marvel vs. Capcom 2, right? PlayStation 2.
Sealed, right? Because it was also on Xbox.
It was. Oh, wait. No, I don't want Sega CD new. We did that last one. So, PlayStation 2.
What? 10K? What are we looking at?
$967.
So about
sealed.
$1,000. Yeah, okay.
Were you recording that at all?
Yeah, I was. I'm going to save your turkey gobble.
Jeez.
So yeah, man, you just gave away $1,000.
No, when I sold the collection, that was factored into the price.
All right, fine. But sure.
Actually, no, I let that one go before the collection because I worked a trade. So this, I'm sorry.
I got chicken nuggets and the dipping sauce.
I worked that in a
Jeremy got burned in that deal.
I worked it in a trade for a really, really awesome copy of Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo.
What the hell is Chrono Trigger?
Fuck a you.
That's Mario's brother Enzo. He's a bit crass.
But, so, yeah, welcome back. We came from a really insane high, even right after the break, with almost $1,000 video game.
Yeah, we're fiending for it right now, but we gotta, go through some withdrawals. So I'll basically just, throw the... How do I want to describe this? I'll basically just throw it all out there. When the 2000s came around, Capcom moved away from making fighting games and was making things like Devil May Cry, and Resident Evil was picking up when they were developing stuff like that. They were looking into new franchises and going into new systems, new IPs, doing all sorts of stuff. They were going to make an update to Gunsmoke, which became Red Dead Revolver when they just gave that to Rockstar. So stuff like that happened.
I mean, it's a telling sign. So we literally talked about some amazing highs right before the break. It's a telltale sign when the game that was released after Capcom vs. SNK 2, because they did release one more before their little bit of a hiatus, remember? Capcom vs. SNK, Millennium Fight 2000 Pro.
That was the PS1 port, I believe.
2002 PS1 game. Also for Dreamcast in Japan.
Yes, it was.
But
iterations of games like that for fighting games were happened all the time.
You are true, but when you're when you're still a new title, one console was literally on its death knells, and then the other one nobody was developing any games for besides arbitrary sports throwaways.
FIFA would be crying right now.
I mean, EA is crying right now.
Because they lost FIFA.
And now it's going to be EA FC Soccer or something.
Something stupid.
Yep. So, but I think that's a telltale sign because they were checking off all the video games coming out. They were checking off arcade cabinets coming out. And then, as you mentioned before the break, Street Fighter, it was what? Street Fighter Alpha 3, right?
For what?
Just 3.
Oh,
that doesn't make sense.
Well,
they didn't make sense.
Well, like I said, iterations were part of the whole thing because Street Fighter 3 did not perform well, at all.
No, that one kind of the black sheep of the family, really.
Totally what, and it didn't become prominent until all the fighting game nerds played Third Strike, and they were like, "This is awesome," and me with them. So that one didn't recoup any real losses until way later in its life cycle. So and speaking of so John touched a really a very salient point. Capcom's starting to branch off with their new franchises. They're developing for multiple systems as they have been, but they're really pushing those new IPs. So we got Beautiful Joe, which was pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, that was a really cool IP. And when they finally came back, because it wasn't until 2005 that they started to come back to the Versus series, you gotta feel for the chaos of what they were doing because it was only in Japan, but it was Namco versus Capcom.
I need to correct you. I'm sorry. So Namco X Capcom. This is where we get into.
Oh, sorry, X Capcom.
No, but what I'm saying is that Namco X Capcom wasn't necessarily a fighting game or a versus game. It was a collaboration, yes, developed by Monolith Soft, who are now doing the Xenoblade games, but the crossover didn't fully die, and it took us about 4 years to get to this point, and it was just a shame because, yes, it was a fun game to play if you liked strategy
role-playing games.
With, all that kind of stuff in it. And God knows,
me.
I have my copy of Project Cross Zone for my 3DS still. But it was taking things in a different direction. They hadn't made fighting games in a while, and the PS2 was being led by a lot of the 3D fighters of the time. Even things like the Mortal Kombats with the Deadly Alliances and Armageddons and all sorts of stuff.
Well, remember,
Tekken.
This was 05. We were kind of chomping at the bit for the next console. Because 05, we were chomping at the bit for the 360, the PS3.
Whatever the hell Nintendo was cooking up, then they threw us a freaking GameCube and duct tape.
And in researching this, because, ladies and gentlemen, so our kind of manicness. Last night, we were literally like, hey, what are we going to talk about on this episode? And we're pitching ideas, and we both settled on, we haven't done a Fallen franchise in a while. Capcom Versus series, that's kind of a powerful Fallen franchise if you're a fighting game nerd. And
which I am. Thank you.
He is. And I was deep diving, and I literally struck gold finding Namco X Capcom. Found it for computer, emulated it, because I'm not going to own a Japanese PlayStation 2 ever.
Did you get it fan-lated?
Yes-ish. Those fan translations where it's like the word, but then a little Japanese, then the word, then not the fully complete ones?
Yeah, it's also called regular Japanese. Because I'm playing my Japanese games again, and I'm playing as Captain America beating somebody up, and he says, Watashi no nabai wa American spirit desu. And I'm like, okay, sure. Steve would say that.
So, that one really struck a chord with me, and I'm really happy to talk about it here. So, I deep dove in various articles, people talking about it and everything. And a lot of people in Japan, when that came out, they were excited because to them, this was kind of a coming back. So, from that period of Capcom versus SNK 2 to now, that was a 3-year gap.
3 or 4 years, yeah.
And we had other fighting games coming out, as you mentioned. Your Mortal
predominantly
Kombats.
3D ones, yeah.
But none of those...
Where were you when you saw Soul Calibur 2 for the first time?
Me?
Yeah.
In my house, we had picked it up. My brother had ordered it. Came in. He had the one for GameCube, so he could be Link. That's such a bullshit character.
Especially if you use the Great Fairy Sword. My buddy had the GameCube copy, and I had the Xbox copy, and I got really good with Spawn, so I was like, I'm going to beat him for the first time ever. And the GameCube one doesn't have Spawn in it. Oops.
You tried.
I tried.
But, so, I deep dove in on this, and, a lot of Japanese people were highly disappointed because they came into it kind of like I mentioned. So, there were a couple articles talking about the letdown. And it was this letdown in the sense that 2D fighters... you got kind of a smidgen here and there, but nothing of the big notables to where, oh, cool, this is cute, played a little bit, move on, right? Nothing that stuck with you.
Yeah, and this was the lull, the dark times of fighting games, really, with 2D fighting games.
Yep. And when it came back, they jumped on that, they chomped at the bit, and to find that it was a strategy role playing game, it turned it was the souring of the people over there. It was the first time you could find on any type of medium kind of talking about the disappointment in it.
It's interesting you're saying this because I was completely disconnected from this, especially because we didn't get it in America. I think a lot of people, myself included, really wanted it, but we never did. This segues a little bit because I know what box art you're looking at right now, but
the other one that I was highly intrigued in.
The cool thing is that while the last proper fighting game we got from Capcom was, the Capcom versus SNK 2 and those ones, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Yoshinori Ono wanted to lead the charge and make a new fighting game, and unfortunately, that's where Capcom All-Stars, the fallout from that project happened, which led to Capcom Fighting Evolution, which was not a fighting evolution. It was terrible.
So a crappy evolution.
So a de-evolution, if anything. But when they finally got Street Fighter IV done and put out, and it brought back fighting games again, that was amazing, which led into the Versus series making a bit of a resurgence with Tatsunoko versus Capcom for the Wii.
And so as John built that up, so I mentioned Namco x Capcom to Tatsunoko versus Capcom. That's a 3-year gap because that wasn't released until December 11th of 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we didn't get it until 2 years later.
Mm-hmm. So it's well, we got Ultimate All-Stars. I mean, it technically was the same game, but
it was an updated version that had more characters and all sorts of cool stuff. But the fact is that we got it because this also felt, at the time. I'm too excited. It was the style at the time to look at that kind of stuff and be like, they're testing the waters. What if we get a Hanna-Barbera versus Capcom? Or we just get the port of this game? Or what if...
The fact that you play as Beautiful Joe.
Yes. And he also plays Frank West, which was dope. And the giant robot from Lost Planet, which was cool. And also, Joe the Condor, who was an unlockable character in the American version, every time he hits you, in Japanese he's saying, fuck you. I thought that was hilarious. But when Tatsunoko got localized and it sold well, which was an important thing, especially for Capcom, that is what lit the fire under their butts to make Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Mm-hmm. And my God, I played that game to death. To death.
So, what I want you all to understand, so here in America, obviously we've mentioned some Japanese games in our history of this, and what I really like about this one, so John and I, we're pretty manic when it comes to episodes. I'm all over the place, he's all over the place, zany to the max, there's baloney in our sacks.
There's baloney in our slacks can be very misconstrued.
I said sacks.
I know, but I know you said sacks because that just made it more blatant and made me think about it. Because I'm thinking, yes, the long tube of bologna.
But we, in reality, here in America, it was a 9-year gap.
9 years, y'all.
9 years from one Capcom Versus style game to another.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite some time.
And ports don't count, people the straw men in the comments who I'm making up right now. Ports.
He's fighting himself, ladies and gentlemen.
Ports to Xbox Live Arcade and PSN don't frickin' count. They're the same game.
It was sad, really. So for me, I'm not the biggest fighting connoisseur. I'm not the biggest fighting guru. But the Capcom Versus series, the one thing that I would say about any of them, from the Japanese-only releases to any of them that are not Namco x Capcom, they're very easy to pick up. The controls are very intuitive. And honestly, it's a lot more beginner-friendly than going in to learn and master, if you want to get super good at, Soul Calibur or Street Fighter or whatever. And that was one of the selling points, and what I think.
Well, now we get to talk about actual design real quickly. So I think this is really cool. When the initial Capcom Marvel games came out, they used the 6-button strong, medium, light attack system from 6-button fighters, right? Mm-hmm. That was the style of the time. So you could use those and make your combos and fight the way you wanted to. Sometimes combos would be very rudimentary, but then as they started to iterate more, they only had light and heavy attacks. They had tag team combinations. The focus was on the hyper combo finishes and all sorts of crazy special moves, aerial raves and juggles and all sorts of crazy combos. They developed an entirely different system that was not necessarily about prowess, but coming up with cool combos and working in characters and their special finishes and seeing what characters paired well with one another, to the point where, and you even said accessibility, which was a big thing. So normal and turbo, those speeds, that's cool. But especially in the Versus games, they have the manual mode and the easy mode. Easy mode will chain things for you into juggles, into launchers, and all sorts of stuff. To me, from a design standpoint, that takes a lot of thought and a lot of time and effort. And that's also what made them so accessible and fun and over the top. They're party games.
Yeah,
They're freaking party games.
Well, let's be real. You lay a Capcom versus game on the table. You lay a Soul Calibur, a Tekken, a Mortal Kombat, a Street Fighter,
A Virtua Fighter,
even Killer Instinct.
Yep.
We'll go a little
KI.
We'll go a little old school. What's the most accessible out of all of those?
Successful or
accessible?
Oh, I think you said
I had
successful.
to enunciate.
Okay, thank you. Accessible? Yeah, man.
Capcom versus followed by Killer Instinct.
Yeah,
Like, they kept Killer Instinct simple, just combo breaker.
You do Hunter chains, and then you launch someone in the air, and then you just freaking smack them down with a Hadouken. That's Capcom, baby.
So it was nice to see, and it was weird because like when in 2010 when we got Tatsunoko versus Capcom Ultimate All Stars, came out on the Wii.
Yep.
I can't exactly think of fighters on the Wii per se because at the time your heavy hitters were 360, PS3.
Well, it's also funny too because Brawl was pretty much in a league of its own when it comes to any type of fighting.
Smash is its own entity. It is the ultimate party fighter, and honestly, with how we're talking about this, I would say in a solid second place on the party fighter regime.
TMNT Smash Up.
I hate you.
From two of the people who worked on the QA team for Smash Bros. Yeah.
So,
but
yeah, no. So Marvel vs. Capcom 3, like,
yes, we tangented hard there, but coming back to Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and then Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. These two games, they gave me everything I wanted. When they put Phoenix Wright in there, when they put Frank West in there, when they put frickin' when they added the unique dialogue between Zero and Captain America. When Captain America kills Zero, he's like, I knew a guy like you in WW2. He didn't make it either. Damn, Steve! Oh, it was great.
The cool part about
all good
this,
things can't last.
Well, so the cool part about this franchise is, let's be real, the downfall and the lull and the sadness was 2001 till 2010 when we got that release here in America, right?
Yeah.
Then we got that, and then we got
the resurgence of 2D Capcom style fighting games. We got Ultimate Marvel 3, which was great. We got Tatsunoko,
and then Street Fighter
Cross Tekken.
There you go.
Now this game I remember buying, and I remember enjoying it for what it was. This was where I started to kind of sniff,
the bait?
Yeah, the very clear bait with the gem system and all of the stuff that was immediately tourney banned and all of the infinite loops and bugginess to it and all sorts of crazy stuff about it. There was a lot of scuttlebutt around it. I still liked it for what it was, but it didn't really meet the level that UMVC made,
So far, a Marvel versus Capcom in the 1, 2, or 3, right? Or you can really do no wrong because that's kind of the heart and soul. All the 2D fighters led, like all of the ones before Marvel vs. Capcom 1, led to the success of 1.
Yeah.
All of the other ones, plus Marvel vs. Capcom 1, led to the amazing success and longevity of Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Yes.
Translates again into Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Marvel vs. Capcom 3, yeah. Like
those are the flagships.
They're the flagships, but also because of that 10-year gap, we were just so happy to get something like that again.
Yeah, because, let's be real. In 2010, 2011, fighters were boring. They were fun. Like, if you liked fighting games, you were eating good because look at it this year. Like, remember last year? So John and I were on a work trip. We're in Maine, and in Maine, we stop at a random GameStop, and John picks up the new Guilty Gears that had come out for PS5.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what time you are in. You will eat good as a fighting game connoisseur. They're coming out every single year from any of the genres. You could not eat good from this specific one for 9 years.
That's very true. And I will say, I need to play more Guilty Gear. I don't really have anybody to play it against, so I need to work on that.
Wow. So Podcast Nation, he just basically said, fuck you. without saying fuck you.
I remember us playing Street Fighter V. You're not an adequate challenge for me. I'm sorry.
So what? It's still fun, you dick.
I've become that guy.
Now you know why people don't play with you.
Because I kill him too good. I can't believe I'm too good at this.
So
that's a new voice I like to do.
Oh man, dark and dream haunting right there.
I would say suave, southern, and sexy.
Hide your kids, hide your wives.
Hide your wives and your boyfriends.
I'm confused.
I'm confused, but I'm about to set something straight in you.
Oh, that's dark. But so this franchise, clear up, clear down, like we mentioned. Big lull.
Yeah,
big lull. Then it peaked right back up.
And then it peaked right back down.
So Street Fighter X Tekken, it was good for what it was. It wasn't to the level of what we had known, but it was still nice to see. So we see a little bit of a decline. And then we have to talk about the next one. Like the next one's pretty rough. It's Marvel vs. Capcom Origins.
No, Marvel vs. Capcom Origins, that's a port of Marvel Superheroes and MVC1 to the PSN, using the same framework as like the re-release of Street Fighter Third Strike. The thing that I want to get into right away...
They gave us a hold me over, let's be real.
It's a hold me over, yes, but it's supposed to gauge interest and all sorts of stuff. The thing that really sent this thing downhill is not the mobile games you're looking at, or the Japan exclusive ones you're looking at. It's Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
Well, leading up to Infinite, we have to give two dishonorable mentions. One technically, and the other one I can't for reasons.
Yeah, because even I don't know what that one is.
Street Fighter X, all Capcom, was shit.
Did you play it?
It was shit.
All right, I'll take your word for it.
I didn't
even know it existed.
So I didn't ever play it. So in doing research for this, I was like, I want to see a little bit of play for everything, right?
Sure.
I want to see what it's like so I can talk about it. So that's one thing John and I are trying to improve upon is our research into these episodes. Because if you're going to listen to us for some hard fire fucking facts, I better have some hard fire fucking facts or I'm going to be hard fucking fired.
And there's the explicive tag put back on the episode. Okay. We were doing
Checks
good.
The box.
We weren't hitting it when we were talking about butt stuff, but when we started saying the F word too much, that's when it became too much.
So I watched gameplay and it's horrible, man.
Dude, Capcom has made excellent games, but from excellent creative people, and also made some real crap. And seeing the fact that there's the disparity between both and the complete tone deafness of certain things, like when you see the Flash-looking Mega Man X iPhone port that they made that looks wretched and plays wretched and is just wretched to look at, and now it's Mega Man X Dive, and I hate it.
Final Fantasy Tactics, mobile game. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, actual good mobile game.
Is that the one where you just look at pixel characters of Cloud and stuff and just...
Yes, but if you deep dive into it, the story... It's original and actually engaging.
What is it with Square and mobile games having more lore than their actual games?
Couldn't tell you, man. Hell, Fantasian for that game that released, it was like an 80-hour RPG on Apple products. I will show it to you after this episode so you can see, but I'm going to stay on track. So the next game, in this time frame, 2011 was when we got Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Yep.
You fast forward, so it's literally the next year. Street Fighter X Tekken. Same year, we get the re-release of Marvel vs. Capcom Origins.
Which I was so happy to get. Because MVC1, despite the esteem that 2 has, I think 1's my favorite.
It stopped the fall. Because Street Fighter X Tekken,
yeah,
it's cool, but it's not one you would like. So John, I'm going to use John as an example. One of his favorite fighters is Street Fighter 2. Like, if I were to say, hey, I've got Street Fighter 2 over here when we're done, we're probably going to sit here for another 3 hours after we're done with this episode, and we're going to have a good time on it, even though I'm getting my ass kicked for 3 hours.
I would say Street Fighter Third Strike's my favorite, but yes, I like 2 as well.
I'm using it as an example.
Okay.
That kind of holds you over and kind of, gives it as the good fill. And then you get X Allcom, which is just a train wreck on mobile, because who wants to play fighters on mobile? And then they derailed. Like Capcom, So
I want to hear what you have to say about this game.
So I watched gameplay.
Okay.
So this next title, Japan Sumo Cup. Yokozuna versus Street Fighter.
That has E Honda written all over it.
Oh my god. So
you know what the E stands for? The E stands for Edmund. Edmund Honda.
So
that's a Japanese name.
After the bad mobile game, we got a browser game.
Uh-huh. It sounds like Kingdom Hearts.
It's literally sumo wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason why I wanted to talk about this, so I don't even think John knows much about this. So I love sumo. I love watching sumo. I love diving into sumo. I love the style, the craft, the art. I love all things sumo because I got to go and watch one like up close when I went to Japan.
Also, your favorite wrestler is Yokozuna.
Exactly. My favorite cartoon era wrestler was the monster heel Yokozuna.
Hell yeah.
Who wasn't Japanese.
He was Samoan, wasn't he?
Samoan, yep.
That's close enough.
From the Anoa'i wrestling family dynasty.
From parts unknown, a.k.a. Guam.
Which is currently just ruling WWE. Roman Reigns and the Usos, also from the Anoa'i family, literally are dominating WWE. And it's kind of cool.
The Shield lives on.
Well, I mean, if you turn on AEW, you can watch Jon Moxley or Dean Ambrose, whichever one you want to call him, literally getting to wrestle how he wants, and it involves barbed wire, blood, and violence.
ECW's back, baby.
So this Sumo Cup, it's literally them racing horses.
Really?
It's a horse racing game.
Okay.
Like, why?
Dude, look, we're going to just say this because this is the unspoken thing. Despite whatever worldliness we feel we have, we're still very uniquely American perspective having dudes, okay? That must appeal to something. There are markets for these types of things.
Who? Where? Like, what Japanese person is like, I want to see a 400-plus pound sumo wrestler not break a horse's back and race?
Someone who likes to laugh.
Like...
Have you seen like the friggin' like Japan World Derby video game that has the crazy horses in it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, again, we don't know their market. It's the same type of thing where Konami isn't making video games anymore. They're just making pachinko machines, but they still get to survive somehow. You know what I mean?
So you're accurate. So this probably appeals to someone. But the problem is you go from Street Fighter versus someone, Street Fighter X someone, right? You go from the main staples, like even Street Fighter X Tekken, right?
Yeah.
It's a main staple. Marvel vs. Capcom 3, main staple of multiple franchises, multiple people. And then you go this way. So the roller coaster kind of stabilized a little bit with the re-release.
Mm-hmm.
And the mobile game and the browser game.
I don't think this hurt anything because I don't think they put their best, like, you know, type 1, like A number 1 teams on that game. You know what I mean?
You're right. But because of games like that,
you cheapen the brand.
It's not a cheapening the brand. So you even mentioned it because you wanted to get to it, and I held you off for briefly. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
Yeah. Didn't really set the world on fire.
It's the first Marvel vs. Capcom I can call forgettable.
Yeah. I would definitely call it forgettable.
And so the reason why I mentioned those other two games, when you create stuff, yes, it like mobile gaming, and because it was the mobile game 2013, that is mobile gaming fever, mobile gaming rage, tons of money being made there. They want to capitalize on that market.
There's a KOF brawler on iPads right now by Netmarble, who makes pretty much every licensed thing ever that are those types of games. I kind of want to play it.
Give it a shot. But you dilute your team. Because the original, like, people who worked on the really prominent ones, still around the company, some maybe, some not. They're not, once you start diluting it, you kind of take away the fun. So you mentioned, so John, awesome mention. We're grabbing some food before this episode. He's like, you know what I actually want to try? Ayuden Chronicles. There's a prequel that came out, and you get to be this kangaroo eye patch wearing character, and that's badass.
And it's a 2D brawler, so hey...
You look at that, and the reason why I bring that up, the original creator of Suikoden was burnout with the dumpster fire that was happening, like Suikoden Tactics into Suikoden Tierkris. It was kind of like, he was just like, cool, whatever, like, this is not for me. He left. Suikoden couldn't hold itself up after that. And the reason why I brought those up is, you know as well as I, like Japanese developers, they take a lot of pride and a lot of passion in what they do. And if you go from Marvel vs. Capcom 3 to Yokozuna Sumo Cup.
I don't think Yoshinori Ono was working on that one, man. You know what I mean?
Yes, but into Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, by the point they hit Infinite, their brand had stretched very wide with all the IPs, maintaining everything else. You diluted it to the point, because Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, the story is kind of cool. Like, I appreciated the story. I was like, oh, cool, Sigma and Ultron merging? That's kind of cool.
See, on paper, this is why I try to refer to these things as on paper for nerds and for people who play games. This sounds pretty cool, but the way the marketing worked, the fact that it just looked low budget and all sorts of stuff.
It was half-assed. Let's call it what it was. Half-assed.
It was half-assed, but here's the thing where I will give a shout out again to Matt McMuscles, who does the show What Happened, where he talks about games like these, Anarchy Reigns, all sorts of the what if and why stories of video games. A lot about Sonic games, hey, but he has done more research and spoke to more people about it, so there's a way more deep dive into why that game was produced the way it was. The short answer was it came down to money, because Capcom has made quality products that they support like crazy. If you look at any Monster Hunter game, if you look at any current Resident Evil, if you even look at Street Fighter V, and the thing about that one is because it was a PlayStation exclusive, they actually got money and funds and development time from Sony to make the game. No such deal from like Disney was cut for this.
So the big downfall for this one was money. So Capcom's darkest times financially, business-wise, I think it was 2012 through like 2018, 2019. They were kind of hitting some dark times.
Oh, yeah, after Spyborgs and Dark Void and what was the other one?
Failure.
Yeah.
How many more failures? Like, Capcom had a very long string of failures. Now, the silver lining, the reason why... So, this is a different tone than our other Fallen franchises, because we kind of leave you with the we hope for the future, or Kingdom Hearts 4, Sonic Frontiers, hopefully a new Mega Man in some form or fashion.
Mega Man 12 needs to exist, or Mega Man X9, please, thank you.
Fair enough.
11 sold 1.5 million copies, y'all.
But, real talk, like super real talk... When it comes to Capcom, so last year, they experienced unprecedented profit, right?
Mm-hmm. Thanks to Monster Hunter World, baby.
So this year, in June, we have the Capcom Fighting Collection coming out. I'm optimistic to see. Could be good, could be bad, could be just a little hold me over, whatever. But their company, and this is what I have to be passionate about, actually promised... like legitimately promised to prioritize workplace improvements. And for a Japanese company to say that makes me a little optimistic for the future, because they also promised a whole bunch of new games for 2023. Doesn't have to be new IPs. We're getting Exoprimal, which you and I are really interested in.
Literally raining dinosaurs. And I hope that they put the chick from Dino Crisis in there.
That would be, like, even if it's just
Regina,
like a one-off, right? Even if it's a one-off cameo and she gets eaten, that would be cool.
That would be really rude, but yes, it would be cool.
So
make Alien vs. Predator a new beat 'em up. There. Do that. But I'm glad that you're mentioning this stuff, because for me, I need to check in with my news, because that's something I really want to start doing.
Which, by the way, if you don't check in with your gaming news, every Wednesday on our Instagram, we actually post gaming news. We started a few weeks back, so make sure if you're looking for some random gaming news, go and take a look. We actually did talk quite a bit about Capcom's successes and potential future, which, surprise, is a tie-in with this one. Oh,
how about that?
Even if it is different points in time.
So, and this is where I think we're going to get into the ending and the wind down of our conversation about this. So there's a couple things that I'm sure Capcom is either going to promise or has been doing to sort of gauge interest in what they can do with their franchises, their characters, their fighting games, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you see Cammy and Chun-Li and Ryu in Fortnite, and now Sakura and other characters are in there. You see in the Battle for the Grid Power Rangers fighting game, which was heavily inspired by the MVC type of games, they have Power Rangers that are Ryu and Chun-Li. They have... they're basically trying to farm out that crossover and gauge interest in their characters and stuff, which at the same time seems very shilly because they're making a lot of money already from things like Resident Evil franchise and Monster Hunter. I referenced World a bit ago, Rise as well. And now they're putting out collections like the Beat 'em Up collection, the Fighting Game collection, the Capcom Arcade Stadium, which they're going to make new ones of that one for, Volume 2.
It's a lot of push. It's the wide reach process, right?
It's Blue Ocean, yeah.
Yeah. They've got their staples that are just pulling in money. Like for a while it was Monster Hunter World, then they released the expansion for that.
And then they Iceborne, and then they did Rise, and then they had a movie.
Yep. And then you have Monster Hunter Stories 2.
Oh, that's right.
And we get the DLC.
Funny how I forget about those ones.
They're actually kind of fun. It's adorable to play. It's like Pokemon but Monster Hunter. Only you can beat up the Pokemon as a human.
I ain't mad at that.
So, but then you also have like the new DLC coming out for the new Monster Hunter Rise, Sky Hunter. Like I'm butchering this name horribly, but it's a DLC in the vein of Iceborne for Monster Hunter Rise.
Yep, and they had a Sonic crossover and a Rush Doggy crossover. So
Capcom is indeed going very wide.
They've got a G Fuel now with Mega Man on it.
I mean,
I want to buy it.
Where I'm going with this is, I'm optimistic for the future because Japanese companies, they're not friendly to employees. It is work, make money, die.
I want to make sure that we're not like burning some bridges here. Is that true?
So no, like Japanese companies, they're very prideful on hard work, passion, and dedication. So it's go, 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 grind, grind, grind. The gaming historian, he shed some light on early Nintendo. He actually just recently released a video about Super Mario World.
Super Mario World. I watched that last night. It was great.
And if you watch, they literally, in that, for Super Mario World, it was in development before Super Mario Brothers 3
came to America.
Even came to America. And they were going to release the Super Famicom in '89. And that literally was less than a year of development on new hardware where they have to develop differently. And they wanted to put all of these, oh, look, we can make the water look this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. So all the good idea fairies were trying to flood into this. Yeah. And you look at that, I mean, here recently, when I say Super Smash Brothers, Daddy Sakurai, right?
Yep.
That man, we have seen age so much for the amount of work. He worked himself to...
He does not show it at all. He still looks like he's 20.
But he worked himself to... Remember all the worries, the hospital stays, everything like that?
Is that a symptom of a work culture, or is that him being a workaholic? A
little bit of both, I feel. And
okay.
I'm not trying to be mean to Japan at all, but when you have a Japanese company with mainly Japanese-only offices saying they're going to prioritize workplace improvements, I'm optimistic for the future because that means potential. So this is all theory talk. Potentially longer development times to have a better product, more actual testing, how it used to be in days of old, to where you can iron out all of the kinks, better environments for your team, and just an overall different workplace vibe.
Yeah, if they properly budget new ideas like Ghost Trick or Phoenix Wright, because Shu Takumi got that as a lucky break, and it made it one of their big franchises.
So I'm optimistic for the future. So the Capcom Versus series, we've had a hiatus because it was 2017 when Infinite came out, right?
Yes.
So we're talking 5 years, ladies and gentlemen, 5 years since we've had any iota. And let's be real, we could load up PlayStation 1, we could load up a Dreamcast, we could load up a GameCube, we could load up a PS2. All those old Capcom Versus games, I'd play right now. John would play right now.
Hell yeah.
Hell, you would play right now.
Yeah, play with me. Come over and play on my Japanese Saturn.
And I can't say that for their last version. So I would like to think Capcom has been having a lot of success with listening to fans, getting feedback, actually understanding things, because Monster Hunter Rise... if you look at where Monster Hunter World was, people were concerned that Monster Hunter Rise being on the Switch, it's underpowered. Like, I'm a little concerned. Giant, massive raid boss versus how are you going to do an equivalent over here? Mm-hmm. They did it.
Yeah. I mean, they're no fault that a lot of these companies have very talented people working on games at an even clip at any number of times. It's what a company chooses to prioritize and how they prioritize them, which makes the trends in video game happen.
So I think, and Capcom, wherever you are, like we thank you. You've been
You're in
awesome.
Japan.
You've given us.
You used to be in Vancouver until you scuttled that, you jerks. That's why I'm not getting Dead Rising 5. Jerks.
They've given us.
We're not getting interviews again.
I mean, fair.
I love you guys so much, but I want my DR5.
He does. That is literally his franchise. He will die on a hill.
Yes, I will. I will still say 4 was good. It was not the best, but it was fun, and I will die on that hill.
So I would like to think. So still pure theory. We have all these various fighting games. I would like to see if we bring a versus back, Capcom versus Soul Calibur.
It'd be a Namco cross Capcom, but different.
Or have a little fun. And you remember Project Cross Zone 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Don't, kind of let it be that way. Maybe a little more advanced to where your battles don't last for 2 hours.
That was the one insufferable thing about that game.
But it was so much fun. 99 hit combo, 100 hit combo.
That was great. And the special moves and the
But then you realize you're keeping the level going by making the combo go. But you're like, I want to go max.
Okay, so now that we're just spitballing, you know what I would honestly want?
What would you want to see for if Capcom versus were to come back? Aside from, obviously, sooner or later, we're going to get Marvel versus Capcom. Or do you think they'll call it 4 or will they call it 5?
They'll call it Endless or something.
Yeah.
Because they can't use Infinite again.
So, but aside from that, we know we're going to get...
Marvel vs. Capcom Universe. There you go. But
we're going to get one of those.
MVCU.
Where would you like to see the Versus series go?
This feels very old hat of me because Ed Boon has talked about it and joked about it for a long time. I want to see a Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter.
That would... I mean, if you can do... So, it was what? Marvel versus DC, right? They did that.
No, it was Mortal Kombat versus DC.
Yeah, sorry. Why did I say Marvel versus DC? No,
if it was Marvel, that was called Amalgam Comics, and they made a stupid... Oh, God.
But anywho, so you had that. Like, if Mortal Kombat versus DC can happen... we should be able to get the way better version.
If Sub-Zero and Scorpion can fight the Ninja Turtles and Leatherface and a Xenomorph and Freddy and Jason and
Rambo.
RoboCop and John Rambo, they can fight Ryu and Ken. You know what I mean?
100%. That would be highly entertaining, and you could go the full mature route for Mortal Kombat, because remember when it was Mortal Kombat versus DC, we got the watered down teen version.
We did, but it's one of those things where it's a monkey paws kind of wish, because at the same time Capcom is very protective of a lot of their things. So I could imagine why they would probably put a stipulation that said, no, you can't have fatalities in your Mortal Kombat game.
Or they give you different versions.
Mortal Kombat versus Resident Evil.
Well, no.
Zombie 1, Zombie 2, Nemesis.
So you have different versions of the game. So you know how normally you have easy, normal, hard.
Uh-huh.
You have traditional, or the Mortal Kombat version. So they can keep their
They're both
intention.
Competent studios, yeah. They can make their own games.
And lets you switch between what you want. Like Ryu doing a super Hadouken and you just see flesh melting off.
A Shinku Hadouken that just burns a hole through people.
Like Akuma doing his...
the Raging Demon.
Yeah, Onsetsuken, and just goes through, and you see him go through the body, and the body just erupts.
The way, this is the one thing I'll actually... I mean, this is an entire nerd podcast you're listening to, but the one thing I'll nerd out on right now, you know what he actually is doing with that move?
Elaborate.
So Akuma's Raging Demon attack, where he kind of goes in and then it goes dark and you don't see anything.
And you hear all the...
Yeah, and then you see the demon kanji in the background. That move. What he's doing is shoving a hand inside of you and basically sparking hundreds of mini Hadoukens inside of you that make you die. And I know that because I read the official Street Fighter 3 manga, and the way Ryu survives that attack is by basically pushing himself through the attack and having his hand come out the other side. So he avoids the attack and then he kills Akuma that way. Holy crap, that's metal. That's metal as fuck.
Hey, speaking of metal, you remember Asura's Wrath?
Yes, I do.
Remember the DLC where Asura fought
Oni on the moon?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do.
That was metal as fuck.
Yes, it was. Oh. I actually still have it on my Xbox One. I should play it again.
I actually have a copy of Asura's Wrath on the PS3.
We should go play it together.
Hey, it's a cutscene.game.
It was made by CyberConnect after... Why'd they do that? What was the pitch for that game, I wonder?
I'm just mad. Maybe it was all the developers just angry at the world, so they got to put their anger through Asura.
They were too pissed off that .hack GU didn't sell well enough, so they're like, ah!
So honestly, yeah, we're both hopeful for a future Versus game. The world of fighters is endless, and there are still plenty of crossovers that could happen. Bring back awesome 2D fighters. They don't have to be 3D. Like, that's cool, and I appreciate that. All the people who love fighters will still love you if you make a 2D one. Branch out, enjoy all the franchises. I mean, Capcom, you literally have IPs for days.
Don't blue ball us like you did, where it's like, oh, if you buy enough copies of Darkstalker's Resurrection, maybe we'll make a new one.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we don't.
So, I mean, as you know, you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So for Facebook and Instagram, at Games with John and James. Twitter, ironically, the same.
Games with J&J is our Twitter handle.
Basically the same.
We're also maybe working on somewhere else you can find us, but we'll probably, show that off.
We'll reveal that slowly.
Just like the website.
But yeah, this has honestly been a lot of fun, and honestly, this is the first of our Fallen franchises that I myself am truly hopeful for. So I'm excited. I'm gonna play Kingdom Hearts 4. Like, yeah, I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna pray for you. That's what I'm gonna do.
But I don't know if I'll enjoy it. If they make a new Capcom Versus game, how they used to. Keyword: how they used to.
As in, fun.
Before Infinite and sumo horse racing.
If you put some sumo horse racing minigame in that, I'll play it.
A minigame, yeah, I'd give it a shot. I'm hopeful. Like, if they were to release one back in the vein of how they did, I think it would be awesome.
Yeah, I just want more fun games to play, and funny how that works.
Capcom versus Guilty Gear.
They could potentially put Goku in there. Oh my goodness!
Capcom versus JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh my! They made both those games.
That is still, if you collect for PlayStation 1, that fighting game is balls ass expensive.
Didn't it also come out on Dreamcast? Because that was a CPS3 game.
I think it did, actually. I mean, we have my handy-dandy app. Let's look at it.
And they also, CyberConnect 2, who did Asura's Wrath, also did the JoJo game on the PS Triple.
Yep, it did come out on the Dreamcast as well. Either way you're looking at it, Complete in Box is going to run you over $300 for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Here's $1 billion.
But, yo, could you imagine that? Like,
oh god,
Street Fighter versus JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and then E Honda when he's doing his punch, and his stand is just a larger version of him.
No, he's just patty caking with Jotaro's stand. No.
Man, I wish we could I wish we had the chops to develop that and pitch it. And
I can just draw it for you and it'd be hilarious.
So
I just go into Capcom's office and throw that drawing on the table and they're like, beautiful, love it.
Oh man, so all right everybody, I'm James.
And I'm John.
And this has been Games with John and James. Return back to our Fallen franchises. And this one, we both have the most hope. Why did I say hup?
Because you were thinking about no. Hup. Pick.
That's still my ringtone.
Why? I thought you said it was going to be Sonic Heroes.
Yeah, but I bounce. I also looped it for my alarm. It wakes you up.
I'd imagine so. It feels like you're going to get slapped by a mouse.
It woke Martha up and I got punched.
Yeah, so you kind of did.
I deserved it.
Yes, you did.
So,
So
all right.
we'll be back next week with another reason for James to get punched. See you next time, y'all.
And I got the review next week, and I've got some hot, awesome, actual current game that's not a JRPG.
I'm looking forward to that.
John's over here like, huh?
I've already ended the show. We're not going into home improvement talk.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.